Welcome, everyone. This is our 6th installment of Taking Care of Our Own, Help Is on the Way Resiliency webinar series presented live, generally the 2nd and 4th Thursdays of the month. Mark your calendars for our next webinar, Thursday, September 24th at 1 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. I'll be in conversation with Jason Stark, Director of Standards at Baldwin Safety and Compliance, and Daniel Malacone, co-founder, CEO, and Chief Scientist at Pulsar Informatics, in conversation about fatigue, risk management, and stressful environments. A reminder to our live attendees, if you have a question to pose to either of our speakers or an observation you'd like to make or get their feedback on, use the Zoom Q&A tool located at the bottom of your screen as they come to you so it can be in the queue when we take questions at the end. Today, we're excited to hear from Lori Legrand and Luke Ballmer on Medical Warriors, dealing with a heroine and hero mentality. We'll explore if we consider ourselves in this vaulted light, given the public generally views us this way, and how that makes us feel. What if we don't live up to that moniker? Regardless of who applies these labels, we know it can sometimes weigh heavily on those of us who are called to be first responders. What happens when a call goes bad and we are no longer considered the hero? As CEO of the MedEvac Foundation International, and on behalf of our board, staff, volunteers, and especially our donors, who collectively make all of our Taking Care of Our Own Help Is on the Way programming possible, welcome. We had almost 60 people register for this webinar in advance, and we know that hundreds more watch and share the archive sessions on their own time. So if you're joining us after the fact, thank you for seeking this out. Now we'll have Jared Hughes, the Foundation's Development Director, introduce our speakers. Jared.
Thanks, Cameron. Before I introduce our guests today, I wanted to make a pitch for our Run to Help the Helpers annual Run, Walk, Roll, Swim, or Golf Challenge that started in May and is running through the end of the year. We currently have 157 participants so far. Our goal is 400, with people signing up for one of several events available for all abilities, from a 1-mile family run to a 221-mile by 2021 challenge. I want to give a special shout out to our many individual donors and corporate sponsors to date for that event: Metro Aviation, LifeLink 3, Apollo MedFlight, CAMES, and Flight Bridge Ed. This week, we're thrilled to welcome Leonardo as a sponsor that will be matching dollar-for-dollar donations bundled by their employees and underwriting their registrations up to $10,000. It's not too late to sign up for that, so I hope you'll visit our website or search Run to Help the Helpers. Now to our speakers. I'm honored to have Lori Legrand and Luke Ballmer with us today. Lori Legrand is a sought-after integrative medicine health coach and owner of the Healing Place of the Carolinas. She's also a member of Integrative Therapy Associates, and she's a licensed social worker in the states of North and South Carolina. Lori has been working with individuals, couples, and families for over 20 years. She's experienced in working with military personnel, their families, as well as veterans. She specializes in grief and trauma, and became passionate working for and with first responders and their families. She enjoys normalizing experiences, including physical and psychological reactions. She enjoys helping people live their truth. You can reach her through the portal on Psychology Today. Luke Ballmer is the clinical nurse manager for the Dispatch Center in Kearney, Nebraska, and which is at Good Samaritan Air Care, operated by Apollo MedFlight, and on behalf of Catholic Health. Luke has 11 years of experience in emergency nursing and has been flying since 2012. Aside from flying, Luke frequently teaches EMS, BLS, ACLS, and specialty courses for his hospital and region, including at his local community college. Luke has extensive experience in emergency medicine, pre-hospital EMS, and critical care, and has a passion for guiding others in the industry. He also volunteers his time as president of the Nebraska Association of Air Medical Services and is a strong voice for air medicine in Nebraska. We want to thank also Nebraska AAMS chapter for its recent bronze level sponsorship, fellow Cornhusker Howard Ragsdale's 1,000-mile Run to Help the Helpers bicycle ride. Luke and Lori, we're thrilled to have you with us, and we're grateful to you for your life's work. Thank you for helping the foundation take care of our own. Luke, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Jared. I appreciate the introduction, and I'm excited to speak with Lori today. I think that everyone in attendance today will be able to take something from this, and we'll just give you a little knowledge from our two specialties and some things that have helped us in the past. And Lori can especially talk to the fact of how she helps people and the things that she sees in her line of work especially. But when I was asked to give this presentation, I wasn't sure exactly the direction I was going to go, but there's been a few key points I've noticed since I began this journey of flight nursing. And a little bit more background, flight nursing has always been my goal since I was in about 7th grade. I grew up in a small town in Nebraska and saw the effects of trauma, saw the emotional side of things. My dad was the fire chief, or is still the fire chief in that small town. And so I grew up, excuse me, running calls with him on the local fire department. And I could see the effect of stress and the warrior hero mentality when he would come home from a stressful call. So I'm going to talk about a few of those things today, but a few of my own observations I've seen since I've started. But how does the public view us? They view us as the person that they're going to call to come and fix their problem. I try to always tell my EMS counterparts that it's never your emergency. And so that's something that's carried me a long time. I have to constantly remind myself, this isn't my emergency. I'm going there to help, and I may not be able to fix it, and that's okay. But that's really, really tough for us as first responders, healthcare workers. It's tough for us to take that and think that that's okay, because our job is to save the day. Our job is to fix these folks and get them from point A to point B or wherever it might be. And when that doesn't happen or doesn't go the way that we expect it to go, we internalize that and we really take it out on ourselves very, very hard. I read a lot of your comments from the folks that signed up for this webinar today, and I completely agree with all of you. There was some very, very good things put in those pre-webinar comments about some of the things that you struggle with, and I struggle with those same things. It weighs heavily on us as first responders when we can't fix the day, so to speak. So what happens to us when they weigh heavily on us and we don't take care of that? What happens when a good call goes bad and we're no longer considered a hero? How do we fix those things? Is there physical, emotional, spiritual care that we can lean on? For myself, I'm going to talk to you in a second about a call that's affected me for my entire career, and it's something I still think about frequently. If I didn't talk about that call, if I didn't seek help, I think that it would be detrimental to my career up to this point. And so Lori's going to give some insight on that and how that side of things looks as well. The other thing I wanted to touch on too is that we get compassion fatigue. And it's tough for us after a while. For those of us, I saw there's a great mix of folks on this call today. From every level of responder, including flight. But at a certain point, we get a little compassion fatigue and we just don't care anymore. And when you feel yourself getting to that point, I would encourage you to really seek out some help. And I'm going to share with you a couple things I've done to help with that. But I'm going to describe a call that's tough for me to even talk about. I'm going to describe a call that is very vivid in my mind. And it's a patient that I flew a couple years ago. We were called to a facility in rural Nebraska to transport a patient that dispatch told us simply was having difficulty breathing and was possibly going to be intubated. It was about a 45 to 50-minute flight to arrive at that facility. We arrived at that facility with not much dispatch information. And when we walked into that room, I found approximately a 62-year-old male gentleman that was larger in size. He was about 300 pounds. That the staff reported had an allergic reaction to an Almond Joy candy bar and was having difficulty breathing, and that they were not able to secure an airway. When I did my assessment, many of the flight folks and EMS folks on this call will understand what happens at that point. My main concern at that point was making sure that we could secure an airway to safely transport him and be the hero for the day and fix this patient. So the mentality I walked in, and many flight crew members that are on this call and EMS personnel and first responders will understand where I'm coming from, is I walked in and I said, I can get this airway. The physician couldn't get it, but hey, we have a lot of physicians that call us because they can't get airways, and we're the experts in that. I'm going to walk in here and we're going to get this airway. And so I was silently confident. When I laid eyes on the physician that was in the room, I quickly was put in my place and realized this physician's really good. If he had problems, there must be something really weird with this airway. And so when I went up to assess the patient, he was still awake. He wasn't able to speak, but he was acknowledging my questions with eye contact and written responses. And he was on a nasal cannula, and his SATs were about 89, 88%. I did a full body exam on him, found that the only thing that he had was angioedema. At that point, we all kind of were like, okay, how bad is it? Can we get a tube if we need to? If I paralyze this gentleman, am I going to be able to get that airway? I elected to take a look at that airway with the physician because he told me, I just can't see anything, Luke. And I said, well, what do you mean you can't see anything? He goes, I can't even find his tongue. And I thought, ooh, that's kind of interesting. I've never seen that before. I mean, I know that can happen. So early on in my career, I learned take a step back and really listen to what folks are telling you. So he said, I just can't see any airway structures at all. And so I needed to see that for my own eyes. And when I visualized in this patient's mouth that it was blobs of tissue is how I describe it to this day. There was no identifiable airway structures that we are used to seeing when we do video laryngoscopy or direct laryngoscopy or any airway procedures. So I knew at that point there would be no way that I would be able to get that patient intubated because of the massive airway swelling he had. And what little drive he had at that time was keeping him alive, and he was maintaining a SAT that was nearly okay for transport. So my partner and I called back to medical control. We made the tough decision together to make kind of a long story short. We made the tough decision with medical control to continue giving this patient medicine that would improve his airway quality, epi, sub-Q, all of the treatments that we typically do in the emergency realm for these folks. And we elected to transport him back since he was tolerating on his own and his GCS was appropriate. We elected to fly him back to our hospital here as a trauma patient, or not a trauma patient, but as a direct admit, keeping in close contact with medical control. Again, that was about a 45-minute flight. The patient did very, very well for 40 of those minutes, and about 5 minutes outside of reaching our destination hospital, the patient had a sudden decline in mental status and his airway completely swelled shut. So all of you are thinking, I hope, Luke, that you had your backup airway procedures ready. And we did. We were ready to crike this patient if needed. That was the one thing I always told people. That's the one thing I hope I never have to do in the aircraft is perform a surgical crike. So that is when your training kicks in. We actually criked that patient within about a minute, and it was successful. What I didn't realize at the time with the adrenaline rush of performing that in the aircraft, traveling at a rapid speed, was the fact that my adrenaline kicked in. We ended up putting the tube a little bit too deep, anatomically speaking. So that's okay. We still had one lung. I just put it in a little bit too far. But as you know, in this industry, when you take a patient's drive away, they typically kind of have that dump, and they usually have a dump in vital signs as well. Well, when we took this patient's drive away, he was alive for several minutes, and then we ended up coding him. We took him down to the trauma room where he was later pronounced deceased. He didn't end up surviving. But the airway was in the right spot. Our training kicked in. But after that call, I was left with, I failed. I failed this patient. I wasn't the hero for the day. Even though I did everything in my power that I had the ability to do, I failed that patient. and I wasn't the warrior for the day. And so that was really tough on me. And being a spiritual person, I prayed about that and had some guidance there, but it still to this day affects me a little bit. And I look back on that and I always think, what could I have done better? Is there something I could have done sooner? Is there something that we could have done differently? And I don't know that there is anything that we could have done differently. But I still struggle with those questions, and the questions that you have in your own careers as well, I'm sure echo that. It's tough physically and emotionally. What you were designed to do or what you signed up for, you weren't able to accomplish. And so that's kind of how I'll transition to Lori. But when those things affect you like they did me, we all have those calls, and those really start to build up. And so some of the things that I do, again, being spiritual, pray about it, seek help of others like Lori, who are the professionals. The worst thing you can do, in my opinion, is internalize it, not talk about it, let all of those emotions build up and become something negative in your life that then drive you away from your passion of providing patient care or being in this line of work. I will have Christina share a graphic here. And what that graphic shows is that we're experiencing something in this industry that's pretty shocking. Lori will talk to you about some of the things that she sees when people walk in for her assistance. But firefighters and EMS workers, and we'll lump everybody in as an EMS worker on this call or emergency healthcare worker, they're 3 times more likely to die from suicide than they are from dying in a line of duty death, something that would cause them to perish in the course of their work. And we're 10 times higher likelihood than the general population, to attempt suicide. And nearly 85% of us have experienced symptoms of mental illness at some point in our life, especially those of us that are first responders. And so I would venture to say that nearly everybody on this call has experienced something that is traumatic, that they can't unsee, and that they stress about or they have a hard time dealing with. And when you see the things that we do in our line of work, it's extremely important to not fall into the graphic that's up on the screen, but to seek help so that we can try to change that. We lose a lot of good people every year due to suicide in our line of work because they don't do that. They don't seek help. They feel like they've failed. They feel like they are no longer the hero and the warrior, and they can't do anything about it. But there's really, really good help out there. There's great Facebook groups, the Code Green group, as some of you have heard. There's a lot of support systems in place now to deal with this, I'll call it a pandemic, to deal with this serious issue that we have in our line of work.
Thank you, Luke. You know, I've been on several of these webinars, and I learn something every time. And it's, I mean, the things that you all have to deal with it's just, you know, weighs heavily. And I just want to say we appreciate all the work that you all do to keep those of us who are not EMS responders safe. So thank you. And that story was really powerful. So thank you for sharing. So now we'll move over to Lori, and we'll let her share some things. This is just a reminder to put your questions in the Q&A, and we'll come back at the end. But Lori, the floor is yours.
Hi, thank you, Cameron. I really appreciate that. And thank you, Luke. I appreciate you sharing your story, and thank you for going first, because it's given me some more to kind of think about. I work with a lot of first responders that feel very similar to you, and I'm sure to the other 60 people that are watching right now, and people that will log in later, hopefully, is that they feel like when you've lost a patient has passed away, that you've done something wrong, when maybe what you've actually done was the kindest thing ever, and that person was not alone when they passed. And that was what you were there to do. because you cannot save everybody. And sometimes it is their time, and that's hard for us to think about. But I really believe that first responders, sometimes their job is kind of like hospice workers in the sense that you're really there to help somebody pass. And that can be difficult to wrap your head around. It can be difficult for your heart because it is a different way of looking at things, and as really being that caregiver for somebody in their last moments, and what a gift that is for that person. With that being said, it's a lot of people feel like the stories haunt them forever, and they don't have to. It is talking with somebody who can help you go through everything that you actually did. And then also the problem that gets a lot of us in trouble when we think of ourselves as being the person who's supposed to take care of everything. Our families look at us as heroes and like we don't need anything. Society looks at us like we don't need anything. We're the heroes. We're tough. We're bad. We've got this. The problem is even historically, heroes have always had sidekicks. They've always had teams. And we've really done a disservice in our society nowadays and not looking at the team, not looking at the people that have our backs, the ones that, you know, we couldn't get to that call by ourselves. We have a whole team, we have a family, we have a network of people who want to be there and help. But if we don't allow them, then we become more and more isolated. We kind of what Luke was talking about, burnout and compassion fatigue. And that's really harmful to families, and it's harmful to you. And you will start feeling more depressed, fatigued, even resentful. Guilt is another big one that comes up. And then sometimes those suicidal thoughts will start kicking in. So I've been reading a lot when I was asked to give this talk. And I kind of want to read something, and I don't normally do this, but it really spoke volumes. So the hero often feels like an imposter. Heroism is an ideal that few of us can live up to. Consider that during COVID-19, the nurse that is caring for patients and she feels like she's neglecting her children at home, or the man that is working in the food processing plant that wished he could be there with his family and be safe. So calling someone hero leaves other people feeling unappreciated. The doctor that must stay home to care for the demented husband and make sacrifices may go unnoticed. When we praise as a hero, when we praise someone as a hero, it serves my needs, not the needs of the hero. Calling someone else hero, a nurse, politician, factory worker, can make us feel in a time of uncertainty and danger that someone else has special powers that we don't have. It can help us feel more helpless, which is not what we want, and vulnerable. And it may leave us desperate for some kind of relief. So really, there's been almost kind of a push in what I've been reading of trying to change some of our language about heroes and being able to say, you know, thank you, Cameron, thank you, Luke, thank you, Jared, thank you, and use the person's name and not thank you, hero. It takes on a different life. Thank that grocery store worker, because we're all doing something during this time, and we can all use a little thank you. So also, that being said, when we call somebody a hero, a lot of times that leaves them very alone, very isolated. And it really made me think of the myth of the lone wolf. So we kind of have this picture of this quintessential lone wolf. I'm hoping y'all can see this. When that's a myth, that's a lie. A lone wolf will not survive. The pack knows where every member is. And I really loved this picture. And I'm hoping y'all can see it. If you can see it, both of these wolves are mirror images of each other. They know exactly how they're striding, how they're working, and they're mirror images. And they are a tribe, they are a pack, they are a family. In fact, they do know where everybody is. A lone wolf is never alone. He's doing his job or her job. And if a female that has cubs passes away or gets injured, the whole team comes together and takes care of that family. So maybe it is time to kind of rethink what hero means, or even whether or not we want to continue using that word, so that we can have that team and have that family and help each other through all of these times, and really look at the truth, that we're not alone, that we did do everything, and that it's okay. So I'm going to leave this for now. Please feel free to ask questions, and thank you again so much for your time.
Yeah, Lori, if I might add one point to that, I hadn't thought about that until now. But for instance, here at our local hospital, they had signs out during COVID, healthcare heroes work here. We had people painting on sidewalks, sidewalk chalk greeting the heroes as they arrive to work. So what happens when we don't live up to that? I think that it is unhealthy. I think that calling them by their first name and thanking them for simply what they're doing maybe puts a better expectation on it, instead of labeling it and then inevitably not living up to the label.
Yeah, thank you, Luke.
That's great.
So we do have a few questions. So the first one is, how do you deal with compassion fatigue? And we'll start with you, Lori.
So I think Christina may still have I'm drawing a blank, I'm sorry. The sign that my father made. I think she can pull that up.
Oops. She's working on it.
Okay. So with compassion fatigue, basically what we've done is that we've been taking care of everybody else, and we've forgotten to put the oxygen mask on ourselves. So, you know, when you're flying and that air mask drops down, we're supposed to put the oxygen mask on ourselves first so that we can take care of everybody else. Because if we don't, everybody is in trouble. So it's very common for healthcare workers, first responders, people in the caring kinds of professions to take care of everybody else and forget about themselves. And then what happens is they get really burned out. They've got nothing left to give. So self-care becomes really vital. You know, is it a walk in a park or hugging a tree or dancing or singing or kayaking? Doing things that you love, that brings you joy and refueling, is so important to do every day, actually. Eating good food. Thank you. So this is something that actually my father did, probably back in the 70s. So to be well-rounded, you got to be a square. And so he talked about having the physical, the social, the spiritual, the mental, and the emotional. And if none of those are in balance, then we're out of balance. Even if one is not in balance, then we're out of balance. And so with the hero thing that we're talking about, one of the things that gets out of balance first is the social. And so really kind of paying attention to what are you doing every day to fuel those aspects of your life can be vital in combating compassion fatigue.
Thank you. Luke, how about you?
Yeah, I echo what Lori said. You have to take care of yourself. And I saw there was another question on second victims, so this kind of goes in line with that. But what do we do as providers when we get burnout? We isolate. I think I speak probably for most people, that would be their coping mechanism. They isolate. I'm going to come to work, I'm going to clock in, I'm just going to go home, I don't care anymore, I'm just going to come do my job and go home. And that's kind of a way to not necessarily step away from it, but you take yourself out of it a little bit. That way you start to have some negativity. What I do to deal with that, Cameron, is again, like what Lori said, take care of yourself. do something fun. Don't think about work on your off days. Go do things that kind of rejuvenate your spirit and make you feel better about yourself. For me, that's getting in the outdoors, doing some hunting, fishing, going to the gym, doing things, spending time with the family that get your mind off of the issues at work, so to speak. So you can kind of hit the reset button a little bit.
That's great. Lori, do you have anything to add about seeing second victim issues?
Are we talking about secondary traumatization?
Yes.
Okay. I would highly suggest adding therapy, finding a counselor who really understands what you go through, somebody who specializes in trauma to kind of help with that secondary traumatization. But it really does kind of go back to self-care. Who can you talk to? I know a lot of times we don't want to burden our friends and our family, but they come to us, so it's time for us to go to them. Somebody once said to me, you know, Laurie, do you enjoy helping other people? And I'm like, yeah, I do. And they looked at me and go, then why would you want to rob that joy from somebody else? And that was a huge light bulb moment for me.
Wow. So here's a good follow-up question. When do you know that you need to see a professional?
If you're asking the question, I would go. If you're struggling, or if you realize that you're just a little more snappy or teary, or you know that you're struggling, you're not sleeping as much, or you're eating differently, it's not going to hurt unless you, I'm going to take that back. Keep trying therapists. If you go to a therapist and it's not a good fit, it's not a good fit. A good therapist will help you find your fit. So keep trying until you find that fit and go.
Luke, anything to add there?
Yeah, kind of back to the second victim, Cameron. You know, it relates to the story I shared with that patient that we flew that we thought we failed. But when you have that second victim thought, just like I expressed, you feel personally responsible for the unexpected outcome of that patient. You feel like you second guess everything. Did I do everything I should have? I still failed them, even though I probably did everything I could. And you kind of second guess your knowledge base. That's what you don't want to do. But taking time for yourself, or if you're finding you have partners that say, hey, Luke, what's wrong today? Something's not right. Or, hey, Lori, I've noticed you're doing this and you don't ever do that when we're on shift together. Take those as cues. A good partner that you work with. We're a small family. I think in all of our operations, you work with sometimes your partner more than you see your family. There's programs at our hospital like EAP. There's a lot of programs that maybe you don't know about that you can seek from your employer. In Nebraska, we have what's called CISM, or Critical Incident Stress Management, or Critical Incident Stress Debriefing. And our state level has a great team all across the state that can respond to a bad event. And they bring a therapist in, they bring mental health coaches in, and they bring everybody together, and they allow everybody to talk, and they moderate it, and they walk everybody through their feelings. And I've been a part of several CISMs in Nebraska, and every single one of them has been beneficial for me because I hear everybody say the same thing in those that echo my concerns that maybe I'm afraid to say out loud. And it gives everybody an open forum, and it's a safe place to do that.
I think it's interesting because, you know, I think there was a time when it was taboo to talk about your feelings, and, you know, obviously your jobs are really hard. It is a matter of life and death oftentimes, and having to be able to deal with that. And so we've heard, just, you know, in conversations that we've had, obviously, should people go to the EAP at their employer, and are those conversations that they're having with those providers confidential to the fact, you know, I think some people are worried that if they say I'm having feelings of depression or suicide, or I'm struggling, that it will affect their ability to continue to do their job. And so that's one question that we get, you know, frequently.
Yeah. So if you're not comfortable with going to EAP or seeking out employer provided assistance, I guess is what I'll call it. I mentioned the Code Green campaign earlier. I think I maybe accidentally answered that question and moved it over to answer, but I put the website in there if you guys are interested in that. That's a great campaign. What they do is, aside from an employer like Cameron mentioned, this allows you to reach out to kind of a third party, so to speak, and they've given out a ton of mental health assistance to providers. They raise awareness. They are great people that you can reach out to. They're on all the social media outlets and their website, but they can get you in touch with folks to help you through the things that you're going through without necessarily making your employer aware of it.
That's great. And we'll add that as well as the image that you shared and Lori shared to our website for resources. Another question is, so a follow-up to compassion fatigue. How do you deal with a coworker who you recognize may need some help, but they don't know it quite themselves?
I had this recently, and then I'll let Lori, if you have anything too, don't let me step in front of you there. We have coworkers that we typically will find that are out of balance as the person asked. In the flight world, that becomes more complex because we have to have a partner we can rely on at a moment's notice in the air. And so we're always checking on each other. If I notice that my flight partner is out of balance for the day, we ask them. We brief twice a day, and we do fatigue scores twice a day to make sure that we're safe. And if I notice that my partner is fatigued, or maybe is coming down with an illness, or isn't acting right, I think it's really important to ask those folks. That's kind of their, it's kind of their wish, I think, that someone would ask them about it. They're showing those emotions and hoping that someone will acknowledge that they're not acting right and say, hey, what's going on today, Lori? I see something's not right. My gut tells me. Always trust your gut. If you find that your gut is telling you something about your partner, never disregard that. So frequently I've seen that, and I'll say, what's going on today, Steph, or whoever the case may be, and they'll say, man, my grandma passed away, or my dog passed away, or I've got this going on in my life. My marriage is stressed, finances are bad, whatever the case may be, that comes with you to work. But I think they need an outlet. They need someone to talk to. And if you can be that person to help guide them and listen, I think is the most important thing. Just take time to listen and not interject, to really give them an opportunity to spell out everything they're going through. That may be exactly what they need. That may get them through it, but then it'll give an opportunity to you as their coworker to maybe point them to some resources like we've shared today.
Lori, anything to add?
I agree with Luke completely. It is amazing how it can mean so much that somebody noticed that you were struggling. Because a lot of times we will isolate and we don't feel like anybody notices us. So yeah, just saying, hey, I'm really noticing that it looks like you might not be getting sleep, or I notice that you really haven't been eating. Whatever that you're noticing, just mirror it back to them, and you may really be surprised what they say.
Yeah, it's interesting. You know, as I mentioned, I learn something on these webinars all the time. And, you know, a lot of the things that we've been talking about apply to anyone doing anything. Obviously, we're here to help first responders, but I've learned lots of tools in these webinars that I've taken back, especially, you know, taking a job in January that's been a little more difficult than I anticipated. But it's, I have a small anecdote. We walked into our computer server room yesterday, and we discovered a bucket that was, you know, 3 foot tall bucket. And it was where the air conditioner was dropping water. And it was a very, very slow drip of water. And I think it's been dripping since March because we haven't come into the office. And Garrett and I walked into the server room, and the bucket is almost completely full of water. And it was such a relief when he finally emptied the bucket. It took us time to figure out how to empty it and what tools we needed, but it was, you know, such a metaphor for what goes on, I think, for everybody, especially now during COVID, where we're all having to, we talk about surge capacity, and we're not meant to surge for quite so long. And, we've been doing it now for such a long time. And I know that, again, these webinars have been so helpful to me, and I've shared them with my friends as well. So I'm very grateful to the information that you all have been providing. Luke, you mentioned something about fatigue assessments. Are there other risk assessment tools that you have to help employees?
Yeah, we do. We do a fatigue assessment twice a day. So during our shift, we maintain the same crew. Our flight nurses and flight medics work 24-hour shifts. During that time, though, we have to have 2 pilots. So at each change of shift for the pilots, we do a reassessment of our fatigue and our risk. But not only during those 2 times, Cameron, so 7 a.m. and 7 p.m., but every single flight, the pilot does an additional risk assessment to see where the crew's at, what the weather's like, what other risk factors are there for that mission? Are we able to do it safely, or do we need to go back to bed and turn that mission down? That's tough. We dealt with the situation this weekend where our staff were flying back-to-back missions and hadn't had a chance to really reset. They ran some really tough calls, a couple scene flights, and hadn't had a chance to rest. And so when I looked at their fatigue scores over the weekend, I said, man, those are really creeping up there. They're texting me, they're reaching out. Hey, I don't know if I can do another flight. I haven't gotten any rest. I haven't gotten any food. What I told them was, it doesn't matter. If we turn down flights the rest of the shift, it doesn't matter, because if we can't do it safely, we're not going to do it at all. And what that crew did was they went to bed and they got about 5-6 hours of rest, were able to reset themselves without having the anticipation that another flight was going to come in. And that policy we have is called the tap out policy, if anyone's curious, but they tapped out and they were encouraged to tap out. So they didn't feel bad about it. And then those crews won't be made aware that they missed 3 flights or they missed a flight. Maybe they didn't miss anything, but it's important for them not to stress and to take care of themselves at that point so they can be a better provider for when the next flight does come in, so they can be safe.
And so that risk assessment that the pilot does he do that for the med crews as well as the communication specialists?
Yeah, it kind of all is encompassed in that, Cameron. The one that we do in the dispatch center is more crew focused. How are you feeling today? Are you sick? Have you gotten enough rest in the last 24 hours? Have you gotten enough rest in the last 24 hours? And that gives us a number. Anytime that number creeps above 8, they have to advise leadership here at the hospital that their number is creeping up. So in case they're like, oh, I'm an 8 or I'm a 10, but I still feel okay, we still check in on them. Hey, I noticed you're a 10. How are you feeling? I feel fine. I just didn't get a nap today. I'm good to go, kind of thing. Or maybe it's the polar opposite and they need someone to say, hey, it looks like you're stressed. It looks like you're really fatigued. Why don't you go get some rest, get off the clock for a little bit, go get some food, and we'll reevaluate how safe we can do things here in the future.
All right, Lori, do you have anything to add to that?
I love the tap out. I know a lot of agencies around here where I am, they have that. And actually a lot of the supervisors, if it's been a real hard call, will tap the crew out, check on them, see how they're doing, and have another crew kind of take their spot. I think that's important. That's really good self-care, because if you don't, yeah, you're more likely to just burn yourself out or make a mistake or affects your partner next to you. So yeah, I love the tap out.
So we have a question, I think, specifically for you, Lori. Is the risk assessment that a counselor or a psychologist might use with the staff member? Or is there a risk assessment that a counselor or psychologist might use with a staff member?
Staff member as in medics
I think if you are the counselor and you are, providing therapy to someone, like what type of risk assessment tools would you use?
It's very different. It's anything that I would do is very, very confidential. If there is a risk assessment, it's really asking about suicidality, homicidality, asking a bunch of questions that are going to be very different, and the assessment's very different that I would do, that like what Luke would do. Again, everything's confidential, and if somebody does need to go out, I really try to encourage them to talk to their supervisor and kind of help them through that process with HR or anything else. That probably doesn't completely answer their question, but there's so many different types of assessments that we could use.
Great. So I guess the follow-up is more retrospective than prospective risk assessment.
Oh, that's a good question. Probably a little bit of both. But yeah, probably a little more retrospective.
Great. So we don't have any more questions. Any last thoughts you'd like to share? Luke, we'll start with you.
Just talk about things, and even more so than that, watch out for your peers. We're all in this together. We're in it for the same reasons. I would venture to say everyone in this room or in this Zoom call joined to help other people, including Lori. We all did. We all joined to help other people. And if we internalize things and don't live up to being a hero or a warrior, that's okay. But talk about it and take care of, taking care of our own is the overall arching topic. Take care of your own people and keep an eye on them. You know them more so than their families do sometimes. You'll see things. Listen to them and ask questions. That may be the best thing they need.
Lori?
And normalize and validate the feelings. It's normal and natural to have all of the feelings that you're having, including suicidality. We don't want to think that as being normal, but it is. It's our brain's way of trying to come up with a solution to a problem. And talking to somebody about it can help you not take that action, and find other ways to do things, find other solutions. As much as we like to help, there are people around us that want to help us too, and we need to give them a shot at helping us. It'll make them feel better as well.
Great. Thank you both so much. I really appreciate your time. Obviously, we're trying to provide as many resources as possible to first responders and air medical providers. And again, I share these with my family and friends because there's so much really, really great information that can help anyone, specifically during a pandemic where you can't be around people. And I think that's also, something that's very helpful, at least for me. So thank you again for your time. I really appreciate it. Thank you for sharing personal stories. I think, sometimes that's very hard, but it's good for other people to hear. So thank you again. And hopefully we'll get to see each other in person at some point in the near future. And hopefully we'll have you all back on another webinar at some point.
Thank you, Cameron. It's been an honor.
Thanks, everybody. Thanks for joining us today.